Hello, it is your favorite internet nobody reporting to you live from the floor, pretty much. Got this recently. My father collected stamps when he was young, and I've always been fascinated by his collection, but I never considered doing anything myself. Until recently, when I saw adverts for Dungeons and Dragons themed collectibles from Royal Mail. That'll never focus, will it? Yeah. But anyway, this is a red dragon stamp ingot. I mean, its real value is something that matters to me. And what was it? If you want to deal with dragons, just have one yourself. So I thought, you know what? Why not? Why not get this? Cool. Yeah. So today, sorry, I had so much food. Today is a rainy Friday. I'm not working. It's the 20th of December, 2024. And I thought to do another yellow video. Yes, it's another rambling video about something that I think it's important to me, really. It's not important to anybody else. But if you do, for some reason, find a grain of truth in it or something useful, by all means, feel free to borrow. Feel free to imitate or to meditate on. It's entirely up to you. And as always, the things I talk about, the scope is me, my life, my experience, how I see things, how I work through feelings, how, what I've read, what I've heard. So it's fairly limited. And although I do my best to be intellectually honest, I also have to be intellectually humble. And this brings us to the topic of today's video, which is some hidden superpowers that you uncover, or you may uncover, as you get to adulthood, as you mature, as you grow up, as you grow older. This is not an exhaustive list at all. This is just 3 things that I see as superpowers for myself, and they come with their own pros and cons, and I'll see if I can list them out very quickly. The first one is, I've discovered not just universalism, but intellectual agnosticism, which is a way of seeing things where you don't take sides necessarily. It's a way of looking at life from many different angles, from many different points of view, from many different cultural backgrounds. I try and see everything in life with an open mind. Just keep an open mind, keep an open heart, and make an effort, conscious, a well-intentioned effort to understand stuff. And I think it's a superpower because that implies that I can see issues with ways of being and thinking that lead down paths of, I wouldn't go as far as saying self-harm, but that don't hold any merit for me. Let me try to see if I can make an example. I always mention religion. This is one of those things where I recognize modern monotheisms and religion in general as culturally significant, but as practically irrelevant. Like in my day-to-day life, in my day-to-day relationships and interactions, in my work, that stuff has no place there at all. Philosophically speaking, I let people talk as much as they want and discuss and read. Again, I think what gives religion weight and meaning is the fact that it's been around for a while. and it's a phenomena that's experienced worldwide. And all the stuff that happened around religion are real. It's history. It happens. It's now, and it's important, and it cannot be. It shouldn't be dismissed or underestimated or mocked or any of that. It happened. That's life. All that history happened. All, your crusades, your imaginings of miracles, your ideas about divine commandments, and so all of that, again, happened in somebody's head, and then over time blended in with tradition, with practice, and so on and so forth. So because of the human element in it, which I think is all of it, but let's just say, because of the human element to it, that gives it weight. Because of the age, it gives it weight. But as an intellectual agnostic, I see through it. Obviously, I see the pros and the cons of it. Another bit where my intellectual agnosticism comes into play is I see the demerits of self-help and philosophy without prior experience. It's hollow. All of that is hollow. All of those things that supposedly are designed to help you make sense of life, without actually saying, hey, you actually also need to live life. In many ways, you need to live life. It's one thing to keep absorbing and reading about life. It's an entirely different thing to start doing stuff, regardless of how smart you are. You still need to live this sucker. You still need to feel things. You need to feel love. You need to feel pain. You need to feel rejection. You need to feel approval. You need to feel loss. You need to feel gain. You need to feel appreciation. You need to feel depreciated, or whatever the word is, ignored. You need to feel all of those things and have those feelings like really work on you and your mentality, and all that rich tapestry of human experience, as universal as it is, it's also enabling understanding. It's furthering understanding of the human condition, and I think it's important. So self-help, philosophy for the sake of philosophy, is just emptiness. It's vacuous. It's useless, as every theory is. Until it's practiced, it's kind of useless. It's useless for most people. Let's put it that way. Intellectual agnosticism also helps me see through flags and nationalities and so on. I can see through it. I can see it's man-made. I can see it's made up. I can see it's fiction that, again, has significance. It's important to social constructs of sorts, but I also see the downsides of it, the flaws of it, the discrepancy between thinking you respect culture because you're conservative, but at the same time not allowing for the cultural phenomena to take place. And culture, huge part of culture, is the fact that it changes, it evolves over time with society. And there is this thing where I see in modern political thought, it's not really fair to call any of what we see thought, but let's just go there. You see a lot of stuff around, a lot of times the word culture is brought up, or identity, and absolutely nobody mentions change. Absolutely nobody talks in terms of change. Change is bad. And it isn't, because we are here because of change. If dust didn't bother to clump and make molecules, which then in turn clump to make single cell, to then make multi-cell, to then make systems of multi-cell, to then, if none of that wanted to change, it would have always been dust. So there is clearly a drive for change. Change is probably important, but yeah, it's a double-edged sword. You never know. You never know in which way it goes. And I think a very good example of that would be the difference between stuff that's complicated and stuff that's complex. And a good example, example was given with a really good mechanical watch. In mechanical watchmaking, the little ring it does, the calendar, all of the stuff that the watch can do are called complications. But effectively, they're so tight knit, and they're so easily affected by changes that they break easily. These systems, as complicated as they are, they have one purpose, and they're easily disrupted. Complexity, on the other hand, just means that there are a lot of different points, and there's a lot of different points of failure, but also a lot of different avenues for resolution. It's just constantly evolving, constantly changing. We're going back to the word change. But it also means, you have to think about it. You have to work harder for it. And this is one of the major, I guess, drawbacks of intellectual agnosticism. It's cognitively taxing. It's exhausting to try and analyze everything all the time. And again, I'm not the brightest bulb. I'm not the smartest guy out there, by no means. But if you want to approach something genuinely, with care, consideration, if you want to explore a subject, the time it takes, the effort it takes, can be absurd. It could be a lifetime. And nobody got time for a lifetime of exploring one subject, unless you're absolutely passionate about it. Because then you have to be committed in the same way to everything else, and it doesn't work. And that's the whole thing about intellectual honesty versus intellectual humility, or how they interplay. I think all of that creates complications. It's just a constant tug of war in one's head, and dog forbid you're an overthinker. And I don't know how you manage. I don't know how you do it. Another drawback to intellectual agnosticism that I can think of is people like myself. We don't attract other people very easily, and we don't really join any groups or causes that easily. I have to be absolutely certain of something, or at least morally feeling good about something before I decide to commit in any way, shape, or form. And that's a problem. It is a problem because people like me, we cannot really have large movements or get a lot of anything, any traction at all. If you're genuine universalist and intellectual, agnostic in most things, in everything, it's hard to adhere to any one human construct. Like, you look at all of them, you examine them, and you nitpick. And especially this day and age, when everything's polarized and people are in various groups and clusters, which they have been for since the beginning of time, but now it's probably more exaggerated because of the access to the internet. I think it's even harder for me to find a place for me. A place that I can call safely, oh, I want to be a part of this. So I make my this. I make this, which I want to be a part of. And I think that also applies to, again, politics. It applies to politics. I cannot say I understand politics very well. So I typically tend to vote or think about voting in terms of morals. I think immoral human beings should not be running a machine like that, should not have so much responsibility. People who don't care for themselves and don't care for their loved ones should have absolutely no access to power whatsoever. No power whatsoever. No authority. They shouldn't be. But unfortunately, they're also the people praise. They're the people look up to. They're the individuals that accumulate, aggregate, and generate stuff. So, Yeah, take do with that what you will. It's reality. Soft power is just not attractive at all. Um, was there another thing I wanted to mention on this? If I think of something, I'll probably add it in the description, but that's intellectual agnosticism as a superpower. The second major superpower is the ability to let go, the ability to practice the subtle art of letting go. It's a hard lesson to learn. It is a very hard lesson to learn to accept things. As somebody who is a champion of lost causes, as somebody who is incredibly stubborn, I've had a lot of issues with figuring out how to do it, how to let go, how to accept things. And again, as you grow older, you figure out that you can't have full control over things. You can't understand everything. You can't know everything. You can't have everything. You cannot. It's always a sort of negotiation with life, figuring out what to give up in favor of other things. So prioritization changes, or taste change, if you will, if you want a more simple way to say this. Your taste will change. What you deem important at one point in your life will probably drop down, sometimes significantly, sometimes not at all, but maybe just a little bit, or maybe just a little bit. And you have no power over that. You actually have no power over that. It's how your character develops. Of course, this change, this internal change, will slow down. Certain things will solidify and become your character traits, your characteristics. And that's fantastic, because I now know what my character is. I absolutely love that. I know who I am. I understand how I am. I understand the things I actually need and the things I want are not the same thing. And if I catch myself wanting stuff that I don't need, I have the wherewithal to deal with that. So that whole FOMO stuff almost doesn't work on me anymore. It actually doesn't work on me anymore, because it used to completely wreak havoc on me when I was in my 20s. Before I learned how to let go, how to gently accept stuff, how to gently accept the hands that life deals. It's not easy. It's much easier to point fingers. It's much easier to look for blame elsewhere. It's harder to reflect and to seriously consider what has happened, why it's happened, what it means now, what it means long term. And that brings us to point number 3. I have no negatives for point number 2. If you want a negative, you can't get to a point, as you grow older, you can't get to a point of letting go too easily. It might become a habit. You might even let go of stuff before you even started understanding them or appreciating them, which is very scary. It's not like getting bored with a toy, but you can be in a frame of mind where you might think something will not last or it won't last. And you're like, well, what's the point? What is the point? Well, that's the thing. You don't know what the point is. And you don't know actually how things will turn out. Again, as you grow older, some things get predictable. Some things are kind of obvious in a way. Some of us who are still naive about some things, we kind of pretend we're not seeing what we're seeing and try and work through it. And reality is always there to just give us a quick slap. But yeah, I think that's one negative. is letting go too quick. Burning bridges, very scary. Mistaking letting go for burning bridges or destroying any forms of communication, that's painful, and it's not helpful in any way. But the third superpower I can think of for adults, that again adults have or can have if they want to, is accepting that the time you've spent living is experience that is hard to get from just reading books or watching movies or playing video games. You have to live stuff. You have to live life, which is kind of how I started this video. We take that for granted. But, having lived life for 37 plus years, you get the chance to turn back and look on the things that have happened to you or the things that have happened around the world. And you can start examining them without the immediate emotional reaction to them, if that makes sense. I think nowadays we are so, especially younger people, live in a very reactive world where they react 24/7 to things. And it's very easy to fall into this habit of reacting. But if you're older like I am, or older, you have the ability to retrospect, which is not an R word. But instead of reacting to something happening now and trying to make sense of it now, you can look back on life you've lived and kind of see things again with new eyes, from a different angle, from a new perspective. And certain elements, certain moments, certain situations, they start to make sense. Stuff starts to make sense. It kind of explains why the other things are happening, how the other things are happening, why life is the way it is today for some of us is very easily explained by how we've lived it 10 years back. And that's the beauty of aging, of growing older. You don't have to react to everything that happens right now, because you know that a lot of what's happened in the not so distant past also has an impact of what's happening today. A good example would be in my life, in my 20s, I didn't care about professions. I was still working through some personal mental health struggles with rejection, with lack of relationships, meaningful relationships anyway. And I think at one point I was in such a terrible state of mind that I didn't care if I lived or died. I just couldn't be bothered. And that reflected in my work. I didn't care about what I was doing. I just cared about getting paid so I could cover some debt or buy something. And I just kept buying stuff, just kept buying and buying, returning, buying, reselling, just sort of getting that thrill for a second or two of the new gadget and then reselling it and accumulating debt over time. And when you have these dark patterns in your life without, allowing these things to happen over time, it accumulates debt, not just financial, but technological debt in any way, in any sense. You are not educated, or you could have been better educated. You could have been better positioned to do some useful work. You could have been doing more meaningful work, because meaningful work also means that there is a part of you that's satisfied. There's a part of you that's is now slowly getting conditioned to it's you feel like you matter. People tell you matter. People give you feedback, and you at work, and you're like, oh my goodness me, Finally, there is a usefulness to me. I'm doing stuff. I'm good at stuff. People see it. And that helps offset personal life struggles. So yeah, you could see how 5 years back, what you've done in the last 5 years, how it builds up and what it builds up to. If you only react to things now because of what the internet says or what you've seen on the internet, chances are you might avert a disaster for yourself, but you're still not sorting out the debt. You're still not sorting out the stuff that builds over time, what you've built so far, what you've achieved so far. It doesn't have to be major, but if it's constructive, if it's conducive to improvements and to self-betterment, it becomes more valuable in the long run. So I went up from being depressed in my 20s, suicidal, losing my mind, in debt, to college, IT courses, first IT job getting paid super low, second IT job doubling my salary, 3 promotions at this job, almost tripling my salary, tripling, whatever. And at least a certain part of my life has resolved itself. But it took years. I started in 2018, 2019. I was literally suicide or education. And it just happened to be education. And I look back on this and I'm like, yeah, I spent on average 250 hours per annum a year of studying and working and doing courses. And while anybody else around me was just doing what they always do, I had to push through. I had to try and figure out and resolve a lot of debt, a lot of bad choices, a lot of just years of not caring. And I can see this now. And even though it's painful to think about it, it's not as bad as when you're there, when you're in the trenches, when you're dealing with it then and there. And that's what age does. That's what aging and growing older does. If you start slowly building up in the right direction, in some years' time, it accumulates. It doesn't fix your life. It doesn't really. I mean, I'm single now. I've been single for 2 years. I still have debt. I still feel like I could do more in life. There is still creative outlets for me that I'd like to explore. So there's definitely, you don't end there. I'm not saying I'm done. Good luck to everybody. I've reached nirvana. No, not at all. But when it gets really tough, I still have a good salary. I still have good colleagues. I still have friends. I still have, I try and look after my health. I've built up certain habits that have kind of created foundations around me, a safety net that helps me, break some of that fall damage. It just helps me a little bit. So instead of completely falling flat on my face, I can stop. Or I get helped back up very quickly by this accumulation of good practice, certain good practice. Not everything is good. Not everything is right. Not every choice and every decision I've made was the right one. That's fine. As long as most of it is, or some of it is, it matters. It does. But you can only see that through the lens of somebody who has lived life. And it doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter what you've read or what Habermas says or anybody else says on the internet, any philosopher, any thinker, any book. You also have to live that life. The downside of aging is, you have to start giving up on things. You have to accept the fact that what you accumulate, most of it you'll have to relinquish eventually. You'll have to let go. you'll have to accept that things will not stay the same. Many doors will close forever. Forever. And it's a long time, forever. You will ache for no reason. You will be more emotional for no reason. You'll be slower. You'll be calmer, maybe. You will be more fragile. You will be more deliberate. You will feel like people around you, especially younger people, are impatient and intolerant, which is, again, most likely not true, but certainly some truth to it. That's because, again, they're still figuring life or living kind of and reacting to this nightmare, whereas some of us have the insight now, have have the experience. Another downside to aging is, well, the longer you've lived, the less you have. I'm finding difficulty reconciling that idea, which is actually a reality. It's a truth. At least as of the time of recording of this video, immortality is theoretical. Immortality is sci-fi. So, yeah, it's really hard to work with the idea that every breath you take could be your last. Every meal you have could be your last. Every coffee you've had or you have is your last. I know in Bushido, it's sort of the way to think about things in the Code of the Warrior, in the Codex of the Warrior, which I've read. Yeah, I know that's part of it, but on some days you forget. So yeah, these are the 3 superpowers adults have, or can have if they want to tap into them, or if they want to appreciate them or not. They're not everything an adult can do. So trust me when I say this. Getting older is not the worst that can happen to you. There are upsides. You just have to look for them. Well, thanks for listening. Next video will be about video games. Take care.